everybody speaking for Black Americans and the state of Black America, you should be out there saying, hey, we need the National Guard, especially for how your ward is going, Mr. Irvin. However, Mr. Bill Ward, where I was shot at, this is blood. This is a gunshot wound that I took to my stomach. JG596151. Still can't get the FOIA.
So, a resident from the city of Chicago yesterday telling a Chicago City Council meeting that, they want the National Guard to come and help clean up the streets. And that continues to be a focus of what's the conversation between the White House and the Pritzker administration through the media, not through picking up the phone and having those conversations. As Governor J.B. Pritzker says, he's wanting some help from other federal agencies, but he's not going to call the Trump administration. Welcome in Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. You can wake up with us live each and every weekday morning, but we also give you the segments of this live show so you can just get the info you need and get back to your day. But don't forget, you can get the headlines in your inbox by subscribing to the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. Governor J.B. Pritzker went to go meet with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrants and Refugee Rights yesterday, and he held a news conference afterwards. But you also have the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt holding a news conference in the White House press briefing room, and this is some of the back and forth this morning after yesterday's comments. So Pritzker sitting down with immigrant advocates yesterday, and here's just briefly some of what the cameras were capturing of him talking about.
We are winning here. We are. Even if there are still people who are being taken and still there are attacks in our communities, the reason that Tom Homan, the reason that Donald Trump, the reason that so many people, are upset and want to attack Chicago is because we're winning. And so, and it's, again, a credit to you.
And again, he says that the immigrant advocates are winning in this fight, as you have Operation Midway Blitz announced Monday, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement sharing on social media that they've got video of a detention here that they shared. Of course, a little bit blurred out. Video from Immigration Customs Enforcement Chicago. This is just one arrest, and they say that they arrested a criminally illegal alien from Mexico who's wanted for aggravated child sexual assault. ICE has always operated in and around Chicago, targeting enforcement around the dangerous criminal aliens who draw into the area because of its sanctuary policies. ICE will continue its law enforcement and public safety mission undeterred as we surge resources in the city and coordinate with our federal partners across DHS and the Justice Department. So that's ICE activity. Governor J.B. Pritzker said that he actually wants different federal agencies to come and clean up crime in Chicago.
I also want to be clear that if we catch somebody, we are going to prosecute them. This is if they're a criminal. We'll prosecute them in the state of Illinois, and they will be imprisoned in the state of Illinois. Because if you deport them and they're not imprisoned, they will have committed a crime, and they will not have suffered any consequence for that. Simply that they will have been removed from the United States. So we're doing everything that we can to fight crime, and that's our job. It's the federal law enforcement's job to help us to fight crime on the ground, and Donald Trump has refused to provide for us more FBI, more DEA, more ATF, and that would help us to fight gangs and guns.
So he goes on from there to talk about wanting more federal agencies like the ATF, FBI, and DEA to take to Chicago streets. But he says Trump's refusing to help. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump's actions in Washington, D.C. have been a net positive in solving public safety issues.
Last night in D.C., there was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with second-degree theft. There was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. That subject, the person is also a subject of interest in a homicide and a carjacking. Last night in D.C., we also arrested a felon in possession of a firearm who was carrying that firearm without a license. So these are the career criminals. These are the bad guys that we are picking up in Washington, D.C. every day. The president would love to do this in every Democrat-run city across the country, and he hopes that more Democrats will call the White House to allow us to help them.
Is Governor Pritzker going to call the White House and say, hey, don't worry about sending ICE. Instead, send more FBI, ATF, and DEA to the streets to help with public safety? Is the governor going to call President Donald Trump?
If I pick up the phone and call Donald Trump, that will become part of a case in court that I somehow was calling him for help. And therefore, it will become predicate to him sending military troops into the state of Illinois.
And he says that is not welcomed. He says there's no emergency in the state of Illinois or in the city of Chicago. And he says really what Trump's plan is to disrupt the elections next year.
What Donald Trump is trying to do, which is to disrupt the country, not because he's going after criminals, but because he has a nefarious plan, frankly, to bring military into cities so that ultimately in the 2026 election, people will be normalized to the idea of militarization during the next election so that he can affect the outcome of that election.
An accusation he's made that really there's no evidence that he's provided when he's said this now at least 3 or 4 times talking to members of the media. But President Pritzker did lay out what he understands is the current status as of yesterday afternoon of ICE deployments in the city of Chicago.
Donald Trump wakes up, and depending upon which side of the bed he wakes up on, or what his mood is, or maybe what he had to drink the night before, we don't know exactly what's going to come out of his mouth and what he's going to tell people to do. Here's what we do know. ICE is somewhere on the ground here. They already have been effectuating their plans. We have not seen the bulk of those ICE agents yet in communities, but we have seen some, and we know that they are gathering steam. And they have the vehicles. We know they have about 100 vehicles that they are planning to utilize. We know that they're planning more than 200 agents on the ground, and it's not my understanding yet that Greg Bovino is here, but he has been on his way, and he is in charge of the efforts here in Illinois. And I think his history, what he posts online, which everybody should go take a look at, is just evidence that they have terrible plans for the communities of Illinois. In fact, Tom Homan has basically said that they're going to be working double hard here in a way that they maybe didn't in Los Angeles. So I'm worried for our communities. Remember, this is bad for the state of Illinois. This is bad for the economy of the state of Illinois. You saw the business community standing with me when I was pushing back on the idea of bringing troops into Illinois that Donald Trump has. And as far as I'm concerned, the ICE needs to take it down about 3 notches. And we need Tom Homan to focus on something other than his failures in Illinois. One of the reasons that he's been so unsuccessful is people know their rights here. They're learning their rights. We have great organizations on the ground, and they're doing exactly what they should be doing, following the law.
And it's another issue, though, when it comes to, quote, following the law. Tom Homan says that they're just simply following federal immigration law by taking to the streets in sanctuary cities where local law enforcement are prohibited from cooperating with federal enforcement of immigration, something that Illinois has on the books as law in the Trust Act and the Way Forward Act. So clearly there's some different messaging that's going on here. But Pritzker says that communities are legitimately afraid of ICE enforcement.
So I was pleased to listen to them, to spend time with them. And I will say, people are, frankly, afraid. In our communities, they're afraid to come out of their homes. They're afraid to go shopping. They're afraid to take their own children to school because they have mixed status households. Some are U.S. citizens. Some are people who have legal status in this country but are not citizens. And there are undocumented people. And we are trying to protect all the residents of the state of Illinois. These are people who, people talk about, Donald Trump likes to talk about immigrants as criminals. These are not criminals. These are people who are genuinely here in this country, holding down jobs. They've been here for 10, 20, 30 years, raising families here, paying taxes, following the law, doing the right thing. We should give them an whether it's when they go to the courthouse to try to get their citizenship or their legal status improved, or taking their kids to school, we should be protecting them in all those endeavors.
The governor also went on to react to the U.S. Supreme Court, essentially giving the Trump administration the green light to continue immigration enforcement activities. And the way the ruling's being characterized is that they are allowing for racial profiling to take place by ICE.
Well, Tom Homan has long ago acknowledged that he was racially profiling. As a leader of ICE, as somebody who is now advising the president on this new strategy, attacking our Latino communities, we know that Supreme Court decision yesterday that frankly takes away rights from people across the United States is something that Tom Homan cheers. So I just want to be clear, we don't appreciate and frankly push back on and will always fight what Tom Homan and what the Supreme Court decision represents.
It's pretty remarkable, just the continued back and forth here between the White House and the Pritzker administration and Governor J.B. Pritzker, with Caroline Leavitt reacting also to criticism of the Supreme Court decision. She says, listen, ICE agents are not just indiscriminately going into communities and rounding people up.
Well, Tom Homan has...
Well, it's here we go. Here's Caroline Leavitt on this feed.
They should not be concerned because this administration is focused on the detention and deportation of illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's immigration laws. And the Supreme Court upheld the Trump administration's right to stop individuals in Los Angeles to briefly question them regarding their legal status because the law allows this, and this has been the practice of the federal government for decades. And the Immigration and Nationality Act states that immigration officers can briefly stop an individual to question them about their immigration status if the officer has reasonable suspicion that the individual is illegally present in the United States. And reasonable suspicion is not just based on race, it's based on a totality of the circumstances to review. And I will tell you, I spoke to our border czar about this morning, when ICE goes out to conduct a targeted operation to deport illegal criminals from our community, they are doing so with intelligence, they are doing so with law enforcement sources, they are doing so in most cases with the backing of local law enforcement who know exactly where these illegal alien criminals and drug traffickers and drug dealers are hiding in plain sight in American communities. And the men and women of ICE are doing everything they can to not only follow the law, but to enforce the law. And it's about time that has happened because we had 4 years of an administration who completely ignored and evaded our nation's very clear immigration laws, and the Supreme Court has reaffirmed that.
So Homan obviously talking over the weekend, we shared with you earlier this week about how he is flooding the zone because sanctuary cities aren't cooperating with law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law. And we've seen some headlines out of like Texas where ICE is saying they've arrested 700 plus illegal aliens in Texas. And that's because Texas is working with federal immigration officials, totally different than in Illinois, where they're not cooperating with federal immigration officials. And that's, you know, we've heard the major political figures in this conversation, right? Governor Pritzker, the White House spokesperson. But what about the residents in Chicago? Somebody who regularly talks to the Chicago City Council, George Blakemore, he got up to address the city council yesterday during a budget committee hearing, and he blasted Democrats, saying that Trump needs to come into Chicago and, quote, drain the swamp.
This is out of control. Millions and millions of dollars in debt. Where do they spend this money? How do they spend this money? And why do they spend this money on illegals? And I've advocated for Trump to come to the city and clean up this Democratic swamp. All my life, I was a Democrat. No check and balance here. No check and balance. Trump, come and clean up the swamp. So I went red.
So George Blakemore again talking about how he went red because he saw what he thought was corruption within the Chicago Democratic establishment. Another resident got up yesterday during that budget hearing, public comment period. Taiwan Sims, he spoke last week as well, but he also said that people need to be clamoring for more federal assistance in the city of Chicago.
Everybody speaking for Black Americans and the state of Black America, you should be out there saying, hey, we need the National Guard, especially for how your ward is going, Mr. Irvin. However, Mr. Bill Ward, where I was shot at. This is blood. This is a gunshot wound that I took to my stomach. JG596151. Still can't get the FOIA. Still Stonewall served for the FOIA. But I was shot. Right? Here, this is the reality. This is our reality. And the abdomen is usually where you bleed out. So by the grace of God, am I standing in here giving this testimony?
And he also went on to talk about how he himself was once arrested and highlighting just what he feels is the lack of transparency and the lack of focus on public safety in certain communities. He also said, hey, people went on Labor Day parade marches and they're marching through the streets protesting Trump, but they didn't go through Inglewood. They didn't go through some of the neighborhoods to march and protest Trump where there's been high rates of murders and other violent crimes. So we'll continue to monitor and see what's going on. And you can wake up with us here each and every weekday morning for Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and go to thecentersquare.com.